Hey everyone, welcome to the special Mad Max edition of Grab a Stack of Rock with me, all the way from the wasteland that is Rock Daydream Nation. From Gastown, we have Harrison. And joining us from the Bullet Farm, Mr. Peter Kerr. How are you guys doing? I don't know why we're in square. The layouts have changed. I don't know what to, it's fine. It's not ideal, but it's fine.
Very good.
How are you guys doing tonight?
Good. Doing well. Looking forward to this.
Yes, I have as well. I have immersed myself in the Mad Max films over the last 3 weeks. I just rewatched some highlights from Road Warrior, aka Mad Max 2, just now, and I'm ready. I'm ready to wreak carnage across the highway.
Excellent. No, looking forward to it.
Cool. Well, as you guys may or may not know, we used to like to start the show with a little thing called Ask Harrison. And this is a question that has actually been sitting in the queue for almost a year, and it's absolutely appropriate for tonight. So, Harrison, here is your question from Mad Max the Axe.
Hello, Harrison. Mad Max the Axe here. Max couldn't be on in person, so he sent his more evil twin instead. Now I have heard you're a fan of the Mad Max movies, and also the car that appears in them. No, I have not been creeping your Facebook page. So, anyway, I thought it would be fun to ask you a few trivia questions based on the Interceptor Mad Max drives in the films. So, here we go. Number 1. What make, model, and year is this car? Number 2, for what price did the original film studio try to sell this car for following completion of the first film? Side note, they were trying to recoup production costs as the movie had a whopping $20,000 vehicle budget. And finally, number 3, who owns the original Mad Max Interceptor today? These are just some of things that keep me up at night, wondering if you knew. As always, good seeing you, and g'day, mate.
So first question was make, model, year.
1973 XB-GT Ford Falcon, if my memory serves me right, and it was originally white.
Fascinating. Second question is, do you know how much the studio tried to sell it for?
Now that I don't know, but I do know that it didn't get sold, and it sat in like a junkyard backyard for ages until it got rebought. I think this was after Road Warrior, and I don't know if it's still there, but I know that it was definitely like the Cars of the Stars Museum, but it may have been moved from there.
And do you know who the current owner is?
No, I'd have to. The last person I know was I think Cars of the Stars Museum.
Okay, so Harrison may be a 1 or 2 for 3, but either way, that question was sent in by T-Bone Erickson almost a year ago when he was fiddling around with those little the emulators where you could put your face onto a celebrity. Anyway, that was fun. Tonight we're ranking all 5 Mad Max films. So before we get started, I just wanted to ask each one of you, how old were you? What were the circumstances behind you first seeing your first Mad Max film, and which one it was? Starting with you, Harrison.
I was 16.
Okay.
Ignore that. And basically, that Facebook profile picture is it. I sort of had Mad Max on my radar for a bit when I was 16. And then we went to a car show, and some of the cars that were there was that one that I posed with. That was the done up like the original Mad Max Interceptor. And then there was a Road Warrior version with all the accoutrement inside and, the tanks and everything. And I didn't get picked. I think I got some pictures of that one, but I wasn't standing with that one. And then shortly after, I watched the first Mad Max film. And then from there, it just snowballed.
And how old were you in that photo?
16.
16. Okay, gotcha. So it was 16 and the first Mad Max film. Cool. And Peter, what about yourself?
All right, a bit of a story here. So I'm in Melbourne with my parents, and as you do when you're on holidays in a different city in Australia, let's go to the movies. So I'm 14 years, and my parents are very religious,
Okay.
very conservative. And I looked at this photo, and it was Mad Max 2, and I said, "When do we see that?" Because my dad liked a good old action film, you know, The Great Escape, those John Wayne movies, a bit of Clint Eastwood. So we saw Mad Max 2. That was certainly a bit of an experience, being in the audience and silently cheering. And my mum and dad were going, oh, you know, covering their face and thinking, what am I seeing? Because there was, my mum, I think, threatened to take, you know, come on, let's get out of here. This is not suitable. But we made it through, because there's a lot of scenes that were quite confronting for my mum. And my love affair of this movie grew by me secretly cheering and looking at the excitement of this ultra-violent, wonderful, in-your-face movie. Mad Max, I saw that afterwards, and I probably saw that at the dawn of the VHS age, where you go to your local video store, Mike, and plonk down $10 to rent a video and pay $100 deposit. Yes, this is in the olden days.
Yes.
Where video cassettes were very expensive, and, you know, you'd have to sign a contract, you know, to get the video out and make sure you return and rewind it, or there'd be these really bad, you know, penalties. And
that really cool padded briefcase that they give you the VCR inside.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was on Roadshow home video, you know,
yeah,
plonked it in, had all the previews, and then Mad Max came on, and I think I saw it on after school with some mates, and we just loved it. So Mad Max 2, that was the first, you know, getting excited, and then watching Mad Max on a VHS, and then I was sold. Loved it.
Well, we were all very young, apparently, when we saw Mad Max for the first time. And I'm thinking, let's see, Road Warrior came out in what, 81? So yes. I'm thinking I might have seen it in 83 at the latest, which would have made me 12, 11 years old, you know. I can't remember. My parents must have rented Mad Max, because I think I was pretty familiar with the character, but Road Warrior is the one that I effectively saw for the first time, you know, around the time your childhood memories start to stick with you. And the post-apocalyptic genre was so hot at that time. There were so many movies of that genre, and Mad Max might have been the coolest of them all. I wanted to be the Road Warrior. I used to roll up my one sleeve of my shirt because his one was torn off his. I used to roll up one sleeve of my shirt, and I wished for fingerless gloves just like his. And I used to kind of strut around pretending I was the Road Warrior, you know. It had such an impact on us as kids. And we will discuss, I think, each of these movies in a fair bit of detail as we get going here. But effectively, what we've learned here is that we were all fairly young when we were exposed to Max Rokitansky for the very first time. So with that in mind, here we go. We're going to try to rank these films, and we're going to go from the bottom up. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we dislike these films, although in some cases we might. In some cases, it might just be, I like this one more than this one and this one. That's all. But I have a feeling, just a feeling, that Harrison and Peter have strong opinions about their least favorites. We're going to start with Harrison. Go ahead, my friend.
So I have decided that I'm just going to give you a proper list. No messing around here. But I still am going to talk about the other sort of non-movie Mad Max media as it becomes relevant.
Yes.
So number 5 is, to no surprise, Beyond Thunderdome.
There it is.
Let me just get the damn double glare. There we are. That's better. So, yeah, Thunderdome, look, it's not as bad as I may have been playing it up to be in the lead up to this show, but the truth of it is it just doesn't feel like Mad Max in the way the other Mad Max films do. Like, it has its moments, and it did certainly had a lasting impact on the franchise with the idea of the Thunderdome. But yeah, it had its moments, but they were few. I'm afraid. My favorite moment in the film is this. You can almost miss it. It's basically when Max, at the very end, when Max is like sort of climbing up onto one of the auntie's cars, and then he's got a guy on his back climbing up him, and he has to like shrug off his jacket basically, and he loses his jacket with the guy. That reminds me of old Mad Max. The like nothing is sacred. Like, you know, the car goes, the jacket goes, sort of thing. There's no plot armor for these things, you know, that sort of thing. But yeah, few and far between. Thunderdome's not a great film. I guess the best thing about Thunderdome I can say is that I finally got it on DVD now, so I can finally line up the spines.
That's nice. Can you hold them sideways again? We're going to do a nice Tim Durling shot here. There we go.
Let me just.
That's nice. So that's some Australian printings.
There we are.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I've never seen
I had Mad Max and the Road Warrior for like years and Thunderdome, but when Furiosa came out in cinemas, they ordered in a whole batch of new Thunderdome DVDs. So as soon as I saw it, I was like, give it to me. I can finally complete this.
That's cool.
But yeah, that is all I have to say about Beyond Thunderdome, I'm afraid.
Okay. Well, Peter, I think from our personal discussions, you have a different least favorite, don't you?
Yeah, I do. I've got no props, so I'll just leave it to you folks to put it up.
Tons of props.
Yeah, Fury Road for me is, I think that's a very overrated film. It's my least favorite of the series. I think it feels like it's a Mad Max for the modern era, but to me, there's a very much a disconnect from the early mythology and feel of those earlier films. It's heading into a direction that's more CGI, more modern filmmaking, where to me, there's a lot of action, but less suspense. You know,
a lot of Fury Road was practical effects. I've read a lot about the.
Hey, you wait till I finish, son. You wait till I finish. So what I'm thinking is that Furiosa, which is one of the side characters, becomes the main character in Fury Road, and Mad Max is sort of like a side entree. So I don't really get the feel that Tom Hardy is the same character that Mel Gibson was in those original films. He's got a different sort of characterization, and you know, it's basically they go down the road and they come back the road. It's like one chase that they go down the road, they come back the road, and at the end of it, it's much ado for nothing. There's a lot of set pieces, but there's not a lot of excitement. There's not a lot of thrill that those earlier films had. And to me, it's a real disconnect in the mythology. It's nice to see Hugh Keys-Burns back in the fold. He's a wonderful actor, and that was his final performance in it, albeit in a different. There's a couple of interesting sequences, but to me, it's modern filmmaking in the sort of very going that CGI direction that I don't really like. I like that early Grant Page stunts where there's real sense of danger and suspense and characterization. I don't get the feel of this one. And one thing I noticed about the Mad Max mythology is a lot of it in the start, and we'll talk about that when we talk about Mad Max, is Shakespearean, where you have a lot of the baddies talk in this language that's not quite how you and I would talk. And a lot of it's influenced by, I think, A Clockwork Orange. But when it gets to Mad Max Fury Road, it's a whole different dialect, which is kind of very alien. And it's so sort of abstract. And to me, I found it a little bit distracting. So I'm not a Fury Road. I may be a contrarian on this. It was nominated for Best Film at the Oscars. Everyone loved it. I may be in the minority, but to me, this is the lesser film out of all of the Mad Max series.
Okay.
I think there's definitely people out there who feel the same as you. Underneath all of that critical praise that it got, there were a lot of people who felt that it was a bait and switch. You know, being marketed as a Mad Max film, but him taking second fiddle to Furiosa. And I think we saw sort of like the after effects of that with the box office of Furiosa. We know it didn't do as great as Fury Road despite receiving similar critical acclaim. And yes, as I brought up earlier, a lot of Fury Road was actually practical. Most of it, I think something like 85% was practical. Furiosa, much different.
I think, yes. I think, though, there was a lot of CG enhancement to a lot of the action scenes, but they feel different because I've watched these films.
I mean, yeah, the whole world is like color graded with, CG,
okay, yeah,
super saturated and all.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's not like actual like CG stunts are few and far between. Like the one where the car flips after it hits the tripwire is like one of the few that, of course, Furiosa's arm is all CG, but most of the stunts were practical effects. I've watched a lot of the behind the scenes.
Okay. Well, my feelings are not as strong as Peter's. I get the feeling you actively dislike this film. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I've tried to watch it quite a few times, but it just doesn't do it for me.
Okay, so I don't feel as strongly as Peter, but I still rank it last. And that comes after watching these films all the last couple of weeks. And I agree with everything Peter said, with the exception of one thing, which I'll get to. But I agree with everything he said, and I have more to add to it. The soundtrack at times feels very much in tune with the Mad Max soundtrack, but at other times it just deviates. And we're listening to music that's more anthemic and in tune with like a more like science fiction-y kind of film. And it doesn't quite hit the way that the soundtrack on the first two films, Brian May did the other Brian May did the soundtrack to the first two films.
The astrophysicist, the composer.
Right. And this is a problem with some of the other films as well, but the soundtrack just doesn't hit the same. It's too much contemporary at times, and it's not enough traditional shock and awe Mad Max. The wasteland has changed drastically. I watched Road Warrior earlier tonight, and there's a lot of shrubbery, a lot of bushes, a little bit of green. And, in these new films, it's just desert. Like, I don't know what happened to your country, guys, but you should be ashamed of yourselves.
Most of our place is desert, though.
I recognize that, yes. I'm attempting to be funny, but I might be falling on my face.
Oh, sorry.
I like a lot of it. Like, don't get me wrong, I like a lot of it, but I think there's a shift as soon as the perspective changes from Max's to Furiosa's, and it totally lines up with what Peter was saying. At that moment, I just feel like I'm not sure whose film it is yet, and then it becomes more clear Furiosa has her agenda and what she's trying to do, and then she drives all the way up that road and makes that U-turn, as Peter mentioned. But in a sense, this is improvement, because I seem to remember Charlize Theron had a problem in another movie where she was running in a straight line and couldn't seem to realize that if she turned left or turned right, that she would have saved her life. But instead, she got crushed by this rolling spaceship. I think Peter seems to remember that same film. But, Charlize, she just seems to, she can only think one-dimensionally, in these action films. I don't have a problem with that, though, Peter. And the reason I don't have a problem with that is because I liked what I saw on the journey when they got to what they thought was the green place. But it's this really, I was really struck, and it's not very much of the film. It's very little of the film, a small fraction when you get to see that weird, wet Stiltwalker land with the crows and that was once the green place. And I was fascinated by all that. I mean, like, I love this genre, and that sequence there kind of tickled my funny bone and gave me the satisfaction that I needed for that journey to then go back to where they knew there was water. You know what I mean? For me, I was satisfied by that because I got to see something that, for my tastes, I really liked, seeing that desolate remains of that green place. But I do rank it last. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to mention about the different landscape. They filmed it in Africa because they were going to film it in Broken Hill in outback New South Wales. But at that particular time, Broken Hill was actually looking very undesert-like. They had a lot of rainfall, and there was grass, and there was flowers, and it just wasn't suitable. So they had to pick up and relocate to Africa and do it there. So if the landscape looks different, it's actually been filmed on a different continent and not in Australia. So that's strange. To me,
Furiosa was filmed in Australia, though.
Yes, it was.
Which is why Furiosa looks a little different to Fury Road in some
absolutely. Aspects. But you know, the low point of this film, which is just so ridiculous, is where they have the convoy of the baddies, and they have Iota as the guitar player with the flamethrower. What the fuck is that all about? Seriously, that's just ridiculous.
It's cool and funny.
I think it's
I'm going to defend that because there's a lot about this movie that really doesn't make sense. For this Citadel to have the resources to create all of these vehicles and all of this stuff, it doesn't really jive with what you can't really imagine that working out. They just could not put all this stuff together. But in this universe, excess, whatever, I love that he has his own sort of entourage, including this massive wagon with the drummers and Iota, as you said. And it's like he has his own. A lot of these Mad Max films have throwbacks to sort of like medieval warfare in a lot of ways, when you'd have like pipers on the hill and things like that. And I hear
George Miller is obsessed with having midgets and dwarfs in films. There's so many, sort of carnival. Going back to the Todd Browning film, I think that's the director, Freaks. He has a lot of carnival and freaks on the periphery of his films, and you'll see more when we talk about Beyond Thunderdome.
And that really, it works well because you have to imagine that there's genetic mutations and things. So you would see a higher percentage of people with different body shapes and whatnot, which I like. But at the end of the day, I have to rank it last because it's the one I enjoy the least. It's very bleak. Even compared to Furiosa, I think it's bleaker. I don't get as much enjoyment out of this film as the others, and I find it a bit of a slog to get through. I praise Charlize's performance in it. She made me care that Furiosa was the lead character. I did feel a little bit of that bait and switch, but at the end of the day, I felt like, okay, I'm good with this. I'm happy with what I got. I paid my dollars for it, and I'm glad I got it. I'm okay with it, but still ranking it last.
The thing with it being a bit of a bait and switch, though, is, to be fair, a lot of Mad Max's adventures are just him stumbling across someone else's problem and just getting caught up in it. He's never really the driving force in the problem. Although in the original films, he was more of the focus for the film. But I don't think it's too out of line with some of his previous adventures.
No, these films are all about what happens when this man has no control and, he is swept away. Every one of those movies, you can see that theme. Oh, man. Harrison, number 4.
All right. So, as in, we called this a ranking, but to be fair, some of the next 4 movies are some of my 4 favorite movies of all time. It's, like what I'm putting in number 4, I don't dislike at all. But there is one movie that's a little different to the rest of the other 3, and that is the original Mad Max. It's the closest to our own times, and it's a very different. It's not in the wasteland, and I do like it. I think it's sort of like the start and precursor to this very unique world that George created that ends it. That sort of we see come into being in the later sequels. But obviously I love the car. I love the car chases. The characters are all great. As was mentioned, Hugh Keith-Byrne and the bikers, they've got this sort of, I'm going to say X factor. They've got a bit of zest to them. They're a little different to your traditional baddies, as Peter Kerr pointed out. I love the Knight Rider singing AC/DC as he barrels down the highway. And stuff, and you get the sense that you're not, this world hasn't just been created like 2 days ago for the film. You get the sense that you're being dropped into this world. Like there's a history, because the Knight Rider's already broken out and stuff, and he's, the others hold him with such reverence, even though we've just seen him once. And of course the car. I love the car. This is a 1:24 scale model of the car that I have based on its first movie appearance.
Oh. Lovely. So that's a model kit that you built?
No, this is just a die cast.
It's a toy. Okay,
It's a
gotcha.
Yeah, just a
Beauty.
No. Yeah, I like Mad Max 1 a lot, and I guess, do I have anything further to say about it? I don't think so at this stage, other than I also like how stuff carries on. Like, Max gets his knee shot, and in Road Warrior he's got a leg brace.
He's got that cool brace. Yes. So I have a question for both you guys. I thought that the cars in that movie were really cool. The yellow blue paint design, was that an actual Australian police design, or is that just strictly fictional?
No, that was fictional. And I think it's inspired because it shows it like it's something of the future that is not unique to a current police force. So I always imagine the time zone is like 30 or 40 years in the future from where you are. It's an interesting time zone. It's not quite of that time.
Yeah, I think when it came out, it was like a few years from now was the only official given time frame for the film.
Well, you really have to play loosey-goosey with your timelines if you want them to be all in one universe. Although I after watching these films repeatedly, I have to assume Fury Road, for my own personal headcanon, is a soft reboot. It's the only way I can really justify all
you can't really reconcile the
it's
two
really
universes.
hard.
There's only one piece of Mad Max media that has tried to reconcile them, which I'll get into a bit later.
Which we'll get into. Okay. Well, without further ado, Peter Kerr, Lord Humongous commands you give him your number 4. Just walk away.
Furiosa is my next one in the ranking. I saw it this year. This is an improvement on Fury Road. There's some nice set pieces. Chris Hemsworth does a mighty fine villainous performance. I think he's really good. I even like the Furiosa character of Anya Taylor-Joy, but I've got one of the things that really sticks out is they have this wonderful set piece at the start of the film that shows Furiosa when she's young, and she's part of this sort of indigenous tribe set in the outback, and there's all this drama, and it shows how she gets kidnapped and part of the fold. And she's got a distinctly Australian accent. And then it switches to Furiosa as an adult, and voila, she's got an American accent. What's that all about? Seriously. Anyway.
Oh, man, just quickly, I'm going to get into a piece of Mad Max media a bit later on where he originally had an American accent, and there was such a flack and kickback to it that they actually changed and re-recorded all of his lines with an Australian voice actor.
Yeah,
I was going to say maybe this is a meta reference to Mel Gibson being American and living there for his earlier years, and then becoming Australian and having an Australian accent. Maybe. Meta reference?
Yeah. But it's a nice little, it's got some nice set pieces. There's some great action scenes. But again, too much CGI. You're getting a feel with a lot of the CGI. There's not that real sort of human element danger. When you had cars with real stunts and real stunt folk like Grant Page, one of the legendary stunt folk, you had that sort of exhilarating hairs on the back of your neck, could this real peril. But in this movie, it's all very much drowned in CGI. It looks bold on the screen, but there's no suspense. There's no danger. And it's kind of a little bit overblown. It's a little bit long, but it's definitely an improvement. And I think it's around the characterization of Furiosa. And all in all, I think it sort of hangs a lot better than the Fury Road movie did, but it's still not, it just doesn't feel like the part of that early mythology. It feels like, you had the 3 films, 79, 81, 85, I think, Thunderdome. So, yeah. And then you had a gap, and, it's really hard that you can put them all in a suite of the one mythology because it feels like 2 distinctive chapters. And this one is definitely in the Fury Road sort of mythology. It feels like a different type of film. So it's very hard to tie it back to that original film in 1979. because these characters are so different. They talk in a different language. It feels like it's post-apocalyptic. It feels like it's even further out from what Mad Max 2 was with the Road Warrior. But look, there's some nice sequences. There's a little bit of excitement, but it's just too much CGI. I just prefer it like the action sequences to have real people, real vehicles, and real peril. And I think a lot of filmmakers are just getting too into the CGI and just getting back to the basics of what made films such an enjoyable experience, being in the dark room, sharing the experience in the movie theater where there's kind of real peril. But CGI, I think it sort of desensitizes people. And I came out of this film feeling a little desensitized. Anyway,
So
that's my...
So here's the thing about what I think about CGI and what you just said, and it's that with CGI, every filmmaker had their toolbox expanded and they dialed everything up 3 or 4 notches as far as speed goes and as far as physical objects moving on the screen, and it amounts to a certain amount of sensory
versus speeder bikes.
Pod races versus speeder bikes is a wonderful Star Wars example of what I'm talking about. And I think you're right, there's a desensitization. But when I watch, again, we're coming back to the Road Warrior, when I watch some of those chases, and you can't compare the realness. It's just real because it was real. And you can tell the mind, the human brain can't be tricked. You can tell when something's fake. And I had the same problem with a lot of Furiosa as well. You can tell when things are fake. But Furiosa is not my number 4. For my number 4, I decided to go with Thunderdome. It also feels out of step for me from the first two in tone. I found it very comedic and cartoony at times. I found it was more not completely family friendly. Like I think Peter's parents probably would have still freaked out over Thunderdome, but a little bit more.
Mad Max 1, R18, Mad Max 2, MA15, and then Thunderdome, M. There was definitely...
Okay.
Yeah, for those who don't know Australia, that's reverse from our highest rating down to our middle rating.
Yeah, well, okay. I've got a little bit of trivia, Harrison. Mad Max 2 originally was rated R, so they had to do a couple of minor cuts to get it to the M, which is upgraded to an MA. So that was almost a rated R film.
Yeah, funny. Mad Max 1, you watch it today, it doesn't deserve that R rating. It probably got it because for the time, I mean, it would have been shocking and stuff. But, it's like an M film nowadays.
I don't agree. I think it's still R. It still packs a punch. I think the ending, and I still think the scene where the bikers run over the kid and the mum is still shocking. So I fully support. I think it's an R-rated film. There's still some scenes that horrify.
Yeah, sorry, Mark, I didn't mean to hijack.
It's all right. Well, anyway, I don't think there's anything quite so shocking in Thunderdome. Clearly, getting Tina Turner in, someone of her stature, is an attempt to make it more mainstream. I loved Tina Turner. I mean, she's not great in this movie. She's not great, but she does have a certain charisma that just comes from it being Tina Turner. She had her own built-in charisma, and I think you feel a little bit of that with Anti-Entity. You can believe that she's a leader of this community, but it's a different setting as well. A lot of it takes place not on the road, and even when it is on the road, it's a bunch of camels. You know what I'm talking about. I don't mean the entire movie, but you know the part I'm talking about. Most of it takes place in this community and then another community. But that's something I actually really liked, was when we get to that second community, the one of the almost an Eden-like place where the children are. And it's like, wow, this is cool. This is something we haven't seen in this series before. And they have their own kind of rhyming speak. They have their own legendarium about this Captain Walker character. And I loved it. It had a Peter Pan kind of feel to it. I loved it. It was completely not Mad Max, though. It was something else. It was some other kind of science fiction genre that we skipped into at that point. I really liked that, though. I can see why. Oh shoot! You know what? I've been ignoring all these comments. I'll have to address these when we get when I stop talking. The soundtrack also doesn't quite fit at times. It was weird hearing like a pop song intro. That was really strange and off-putting. It kind of set the tone for this being a different Mad Max film. I like certain things though, like I liked Master Blaster. I loved the cartoony Angry Anderson. My God, he was so cartoony at times. And what was with the head, the mannequin head that he's got hanging off his backpack there? My theory is because Angry Anderson's so short, it's a head that other people can talk to at eye level. That's my theory. But I was talking about this with Peter earlier this week, and there's a sequence where Angry Anderson basically like gets blown up, and then he shows up in typical cartoony fashion with soot smeared all over his face and body, and he kind of, funny face. And he gets thrown off a train, and then in cartoony fashion, he's still intact. He's driving a car now, but he's still intact. And even at the end, even at the very end, when he's dead for real, he still has the tenacity, the strength left to flip the bird to the camera, It was very cartoony. But I liked Angry Anderson. He also had one of the best lines of dialogue in that movie when he gets to say, "Listen to the law!" That was really cool. So it was a mixed bag for me, Thunderdome. There's stuff about it that I loved. There's stuff about it that I thought was ridiculous. And stuff about it that I thought I'm watching a completely different movie now. Intriguing movie, though. My number 4, Thunderdome. I'm just going to get to some of these questions here and comments because I have been ignoring them. So we have Roger in the house. That's where the Interceptor is. Roger knows a few things. Thank you. Rob Daniels, Super Channel at my sister's place. This is exactly... Okay, so Rob and I being from the same place, that's exactly how I saw it too. It was Super Channel. And I would have been, in that year, I would have been 12. Yes, it is that old, yes. Hey, Grant, how are you doing, my friend? Yeah, you got it. Well, it's the Rock Daydream Nation takeover. I've been outnumbered by Rock Daydream Nation cast members today. I would have has props. Okay, if he was on the show, no, you wouldn't have. You don't have any physical media. Peter.
Yeah, there's definitely a split on Fury Road.
Yeah, here's the kickback. Here's the kickback. Blame Juxie. Okay. And,
I think it's funny. I gave Rob my soundtrack because it's the one he was missing. But no, I thought it was a fine soundtrack.
And I do want to. This is the only thing I haven't seen is the.
The black and
the Chrome edition. Yeah, I can't speak to Fury. Okay, he hasn't seen it yet. I'll try to avoid spoilers when I get to Furiosa. Too many spoilers.
I can't promise that. My mouth is famously not in touch with my brain.
Well, I'm just going to say I'm responsible for myself. I like that. Lawrence of Australia. Okay, now that we are caught up on the comments, we are going with our number 3 films. So Harrison, kick us off.
All right, so this is where I start talking about Fury Road and Furiosa, and these films are like on the same level for me, except I put Furiosa just slightly above Fury Road for a reason that I'll get into when we touch on Furiosa. So for Fury Road, it's action up to 11. Most of it is action. It's not as much story driven, and that's maybe part of the reason why I put Furiosa above it. But it does that action incredibly well. It's got such great visuals. I love all of the cars and like bullet farmers. Tank treads with a car body on top, and Immortan Joe is a great villain. He's got great presence. I'm so glad Cookie's Bone got to come back and do an amazing job there. And I do, there is I'm just going to address the disconnect between Thunderdome and Fury Road. Miller has had Fury Road, Furiosa, and all those other films, that story in planning for like years and years and years and years. I think like back as far as 1999, he was in talks to do it. It was originally planned to happen with Mel Gibson. And there was a point, I think about 2003, where Mel said to him, George, are we doing this? Because if we're doing it, we have to do it now. But, there was difficulty getting funding. as well. And as well, also George didn't have the technology both for practical effects and for CGI. He didn't have what he had in 2012 as he does now. So originally, yes, Fury Road was intended to be with Gibson, but time has changed things slightly. But no, I like Fury Road very much. I love all the characters, even the ones that are sort of minor characters, still get the chance to carve an identity for themselves. I love how the Bullet Farmer, when he's going crazy, he gets the hot glass in his eyes, and then he immediately just makes it his thing, ties it around the blindfold around his eyes, and continues on shooting. Obviously these films aren't funny films, but there are, one of the things that I find humorous is how they take like a mundane thing, and then they with two words that are part of it, they split it into two and make it two entities. So when Bullet Farmer's firing his machine guns, he's like, "Sing, brother Heckler, sing, brother Kock," as in Heckler and Koch, the gun manufacturer. And then it happens in Furiosa 2 when Mentis is hyping up his boys, and he's like, "We got Mr. Harley, we got Mr. Davidson," and then Mr. Harley in the back is like, "G'day, mate." I thought that was, obviously not very funny movies, but I found those, humorous parts to be good. But so my props for Fury Road, and one of the things that you find out in the behind the scenes of Fury Road is Immortan Joe, and the way they described him was, in this world where it's really hard to get one of anything, Joe is the guy with two of everything. As that's sort of his philosophy. So you see the Giga Horse is two cars stacked on top of each other. He's got two silver revolvers and all that. So I have the Steelbook for Fury Road, which you can't just walk into the shops and buy these days.
Is that a 3D movie?
It is a 3D Blu-ray, yes.
Okay. You don't have a way of watching 3D, do you?
I do have a 3D TV, so I could watch it. Yeah, if I wanted. It also comes with two discs. It comes with regular Blu-ray too. So, but no, I bought this, when it first came out. I've kept it very safe and treasured since, and this is, I think, a really good rarity these days. Not the rarest thing I own, but now I'm going to touch on that piece of media that I said attempted to reconcile Fury Road with the original trilogy, and that is. When Fury Road came out, there was these prequel comics released that touch on all sorts of manner of things. So the first one is about Nux and Immortan Joe. So they're basically framed as post-Fury Road. There's these history men telling kids stories of what has come to pass. So Nux's story is basically there's that thing that lowers and comes down. So Nux as a kid crawled onto that and then became adopted and became a war boy. But Joe's is more interesting. So I don't know if you can see here, but there's the Sydney Opera House there in ruins with Sydney as well. So Immortan Joe was Colonel Joe Moore. He's a veteran of the Oil and Water Wars, and the Bullet Farmer was one of his top men, basically. And the Bullet Farmer has this thing, whenever something that shocks him, he's always like Fukushima. That's his sort of expletive of choice. And so one of the links to the original trilogy is, so Joe has this small convoy gang that roves, and there's this one where Roop and Charlie, two of the cops from the original Mad Max, are part of it. There's a thing where they're talking to each other as they're sort of attacking this group of people. And so Immortan Joe obviously didn't always have the long hair and stuff. In these days, he had a bandana and a gas mask on, so he still breathed in the clean air. And the Citadel was basically this stronghold that these guys had. And so Joe and his men basically wanted to take it. They basically suffered heavy losses, but they managed to sort of sneak in a few of them. And there was this huge bloodbath, but at the very end, just Joe and the Bullet Farmer survived, and that was where the legend of Immortan Joe was first born. Basically, Joe surviving this slaughterhouse, basically, and taking the Citadel. So then the next story after that is Furiosa. So that's just the story of her with the wives. Right before the wives, basically, she broke the wives out. This story copped a bit of flack. for its depictions of abortion and that. There really isn't too much interesting here, except at one point, one of the wives asks Furiosa if she was a wife before, and Furiosa doesn't reply. So there was that implication, maybe, but as we found out in Furiosa, that's not what ultimately came to pass. Then after Furiosa, there's Max. So with the Max stories, you get these wonderful spreads. This is a spread that recaps Mad Max 1. Then you've got one dedicated to Mad Max 2, and you can see Humongous there, and Max, Wes in the back. And then one for Thunderdome. And then the story catches up by basically saying, where is it? So it basically talks about how Max, wandered the wasteland, and he at one point said he would take jobs, and it would and always in return for car parts with which to rebuild his Interceptor. So basically, they're retconning the time from before Thunderdome of him basically scavenging parts to rebuild the Interceptor. And so the story picks up with him going to Gastown. Here, he's got this rickety three-wheeler. And there's a funny thing here that happens when one of the guys, one of these men that's harassing him, giving him crap, leans on his car and is is it going to fall over? And he's like, wouldn't do that, rigged to blow. And then walks off, and he does the Thunderdome thing where he gives a whole pile of weapons, and out of nowhere, when he has to hand over his weapon. And then, speaking of Thunderdome, Gastown has its own Thunderdome, which what's the exact words they use? We've been here before, another time, another place, when there was only one lord, 2 men enter, 1 man leaves. So it appears to be inspired from the original Thunderdome. Max fights in that for a V8 engine, which he wins. It's funny, he fights buzzards, the Russian guys with the spiky things, and he defeats this buzzard, the last buzzard, the boss buzzard, basically, by taking a flare from one of the people in the audience and using it, jamming it in his eye to give himself not his eye, the buzzard's eye, to give him some time to escape. And the buzzards are all outraged because Max cheated, but it's Thunderdome. There were weapons everywhere. So what if he took a flare from, an audience member? He could have grabbed a chainsaw from somewhere else if he wanted, but he wins the engine, takes it, but the buzzards catch up with him, steal the engine and his car, and leave him for dead. And then he gets rescued by a woman. And this woman wants him to rescue her daughter. Now, this is the daughter, the girl, basically, that appears at times in Fury Road in Hallucination. The mother is Hope. The daughter is called Glory. So Max does that. He goes to the Buzzard HQ, rescues the daughter, kills a bunch of buzzards. And then returns the daughter, and then he leaves. The mother and the daughter, they go their separate ways, but one of the last buzzards catches up to them, kills the daughter and the mother. So presumably that's why Max blames himself. That's a little different from what was depicted in Fury Road, where it looks like a convoy of Joe's cars run her down. But yeah, it is what it is. And then the final chapter here is the history of the war rig, and it starts with in the present day, basically after Fury Road. I don't know what you can see, but there's this silver woman who's now ruling the Citadel, and this is Corpus Colossus, Joe's small son. So he's revealed to have survived Fury Road. They spared him. He's obviously but it's never revealed who this woman is. Her head is always obscured. And the story of the war rig is basically just little vignettes of people in the apocalypse with cars. Basically, Joe basically gathered this individual parts that make up the war rig separately. There was this truck, this tanker truck that he got, and then later on, these two brothers had this big twin V6 engine, which is the engine of the war rig. They went up against Joe and got killed, and then he took the engine. There's this other car, the Chevy Fleetmaster, that became the cab. Was originally its own car that this mechanic had, and Joe actually took the mechanic with him because the mechanic was that good. This mechanic is actually the mechanic that builds the war rig in the end. But at one point, the Chevy Fleetmaster gets an IED, takes out the front of it, so the back half gets put as the cab of the war rig. then there's these two girls that had a Beetle. That Beetle became a turret cabin when Joe found the wreck of the Beetle, and that sort of thing. So it's it attempts. I think it's cool. Obviously there's some inconsistencies between Furiosa with Furio, the original trilogy. It's cool to see how they attempt to reconcile the two eras, even if I don't believe that they should be reconciled. I think the spreads dedicated to the 3 Mad Max films are awesome to see. I'd love to see comic versions of all of them. And I think it's really cool to see a little bit of what happened after Fury Road. So that's my talking for this round done.
Well, thank you, Harrison. I think I get it. I think it's cool, but at the same time, I'm trying to think this through logically. Would Mad Max try to rebuild the Interceptor piece by piece?
It was absolutely destroyed. I don't believe that.
Oh, no, he would just grab another car, But anyway,
there is this whole thing in the Mad Max universe about him being attached to the past, and it's what's keeping him in this cycle of not settling down.
Ridiculous.
So it is in character. It's in character for him to rebuild the Interceptor, but physically it's not possible. You saw that. Yeah. It was a total wreck. Like you said, it's cool to see this sort of stuff, how they attempt to reconcile. It's cool to see sort of like this before Fury Road. But at the same time, there's always been like a looseness to which the Mad Max canon has been applied. So it's, like all these, then you've got that crazy theory that's like Max is a different person in each film. It's just people telling stories. And like there's this figure of Max who's just this like person that enters the story, even though it's not the same person. But yeah. Anyway, that's enough of things that didn't happen.
And there's a lot of fans films on the YouTube.
Yes, I think the most famous one is Mad Max Renegade.
Yeah, there's so many fan films. Look, I think it's nice to have, but it's not essential. These comic books to fill in the gaps. I think, folks, it's the movies that stand up, and you've got to use that and maybe put your own imagination in work as to what happens in between. But I don't think it's essential. A lot of it's just for fans, and it's basically, I put it on that level of the fan movies that they make for Mad Max, and there's a ton of them. They're all fun. It's all fun.
It's all good. At the end of the day, you make your own head canon. But Peter, let's get back to the ranking. Number 3.
Sorry, yes. I derailed us a bit there.
Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome is my number 3. So I'm going into the 80s, and this is where I've got the emotional attachment. I remember this premiered in Sydney and played 24 hours on its premiere night, which was quite unusual for Australia. I know that's a phenomenon in America where they have movies 24 hours. You can watch a movie any time of the night, especially in the big cities like New York City. But in Sydney, they premiered this movie, and there were sessions at 11, 1 to 4 o'clock in the morning, there was a lot of momentum behind this film. Tina Turner was hot as in the charts, the big comeback. And, Mad Max, it was Mel Gibson coming. He had a couple of movies that he did in America. I think he did The River with Sissy Spacek, and another movie that just escapes me. But, The Bounty with Anthony Hopkins. So Mad Max 2, there was a lot of heat on Mel Gibson. He went to America, started doing some big studio movies, and this was his coming back to Australia and doing another Mad Max movie. So there was a lot of heat. So when I saw the movie, I was a little disappointed. It wasn't as good as the other two. And I put this movie as to a movie of two halves. First half, I love it. It's in that sort of mythology of Max where you've got these oddball post-apocalyptic characters. There's a lot of shenanigans. It's sort of kind of in a bit of in the wheelhouse of Mad Max 2, but it all derails where he goes to the lost children. He meets up with the lost children, and it becomes Disney-fied, and it becomes like Peter Pan. That's where it becomes like a Steven Spielberg movie. You think if you walked in halfway through the movie, you'd go, "Oh, sorry, I'm wrong cinema. I think I'm in the Goonies or something. I'll go to the next cinema." Just walk out. It's like two different movies. So I put it down to George Miller. His co-partner was Byron Kennedy. And Byron Kennedy was kind of the brains behind the operation of this Mad Max. And he sadly passed away in a helicopter accident. So they had, he basically had George Ogilvy, who co-directed the movie. So I'm just wondering, was it George Miller who did the first half and Ogilvy in the second? Because to me, it sounds like, or looks like two different movies. There's some wonderful sequences. I love the Thunderdome. Love it. It's like cage fighting, isn't it? Before cage fighting. I love the whole concept, they're gladiators going back to the Roman times. I disagree with you a little bit, Michael, about Tina Turner. I think she's very knowing. I think it's a good performance. I think she's all the characters in this movie are very transactional. It's like today, isn't it? Transactional, political, what you can do for me, I can do for you to get ahead. I like her sort of cunningness, and she acts like a kind of a businesswoman, very knowing. The thing that threw me out of this movie was Bruce Spence. You see Bruce Spence in the movie, and you think, the gyrocopter man's back. But no, he plays a different character. That really threw me.
George loves doing that. Huki's Burn was in 2 movies, and Josh Hellman, who played Slit in Fury Road, Nux's partner, plays Scrotus, Joe's third son in Furiosa.
But Bruce Spence is so unique looking, though, that makes him a different circumstance than those two guys, because he is so unique looking. You know him as soon as you see him, even when he's dressed up in alien makeup.
Yeah, I think that was a miscalculation, because I think that threw a lot of audiences. It took me a while I'm in the movie to think, oh, this is Bruce Spence, but he's playing a different character.
Yeah.
But look, I like the world that they create. It's got some nice action sequences. Like the one at the end is really a repeat of the Road Warrior or Mad Max 2 along the railway line. There's much more of a comic energy about it. He's definitely trying to broaden the audience, and it was kind of a minor hit for Warner Brothers. So I think Warner Brothers were looking at, okay, Mad Max 2, it was a bit of a cult hit. We need to broaden the audience. And I think they did put some caveats to George and the production of what we'd like to see. So it was kind of Hollywoodized, but I enjoy it. But I think it's half a pretty good film. It's just where it goes to the Peter Pan and that these ragamuffins in the middle of the desert. It really falls off the rails. And so there you go. My number 3.
And I would have agreed with you about all of that back when I was a kid, but today I like it. But anyway, my non-spoilery thoughts about my number 3, Furiosa. Loved Chris Hemsworth. He was Shakespearean, and I'm a Hemsworth fanboy anyway, I guess. But I really, really liked him as Dementus. I loved the symbolism of how he transformed. He was at first wearing a white cape, and then he gets sprayed with red paint, and his beard and hair and cape become red. And then at the end, he becomes Dark Dementus with black. And I loved that. It was kind of, it wasn't subtle, but I liked it. I loved the structure of the film, how it was 5 parts. It was really, I really liked the way that was laid out. It seemed like 5 stories that were interconnected, which is a unique approach, different from the other Mad Max films, but I really liked it and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed seeing the backstories to things like, Gastown and earlier appearances of these things. I loved Hemsworth's, his chariot bike with the 3 that Harrison did in Lego with the 3 motorcycles.
Oh yeah, when I was able to pull that off in Lego, it was like, oh my God, I'm so happy.
I loved it. I mean, I thought every Mad Max film, there's usually a vehicle or 2 that kind of make you go, wow, is that ever cool? And, for me in Fury Road, I really like the Morton Joe's double coupe there. In this, I loved the chariot bike, the triple chariot bike. I liked seeing the grain place. You get almost like a little mini cultural backstory to the many mothers and that sort of thing. That was kind of fun. Again, I like that science fiction-y world building stuff. What else? You guys have said a lot about Furiosa already. I do struggle with it being in sync with all the other Mad Max films. I'm trying to figure out where this one takes place, even in relation to Fury Road, because there's a scene where Furiosa is, walking across the desert, and Mad Max sees her from atop of a cliff. And it's like, well, when does this take place? In Fury Road?
Another thing that throws me the
years
most about
later.
the timeline is in the trailer, the very first trailer, one of the first things it says is, like, 40 years after the fall, Furiosa is taken from her family, which means, like, 40 years after the fall. Like, that means
Right, so
Max
how old
would
is
have been like
Max?
66 years old, because,
Yeah.
40 years after the fall. Plus, he was like 20 in Mad Max 1, and he was around before the fall. And then, Furiosa, Fury Road takes even. So, like, Max is like, by that timeline, Max is like 70 in Fury Road.
Yeah, 100%.
Even if you discount Thunderdome and all that.
I reckon these films, to me, in my palette, would have been a lot stronger if they were still filmed in the 80s or early 90s, and Miller had the backing, or all the cards were laid out for him, and he could continue filming the sequence without having this 20-year break.
Yeah.
And possibly having Mel Gibson in the role of Max, and having that sort of continuation.
Anyway, that's my number 3, Furiosa. I enjoyed it. I thought it was really different, well made. I like the character of Furiosa. It's dark and bleak like Fury Road, but I just prefer it. That's all. So, Harrison, this means that we are now heading into our top 2. And
are there any more comments you want to address just before?
Oh yeah, actually, we should address some comments. Henry was asking what a 3D TV is, and
well, you see, back in like 2015 and 2012, that 3D was all the rage. Cinemas, everything, 3D, and there were actually 3D TVs devised, and 3D, Blu-ray players, and you wore the glasses at home, and you got your 3D experience, but you had to sit at like the right height and the right part of the screen, because if you were too far down, the top of the screen would appear to sort of like desynchronize the two images. So I'd often have to pile a whole bunch of pillows up on the lounge and then sit on that in order to get the right viewing experience. But yeah, it was a thing back then, and we still have that TV.
Okay, cool. And then Henry was having a discussion about Brian May with Rob, and Rob,
not the astrophysicist, the composer.
Right, not the astrophysicist. And Rob agrees with Peter about the comics not being really as important as the films. And I don't know why usually the images shift up when I put a comment. Now they're cutting off Peter's half of his face. All the settings seem to have changed on StreamYard, and I'll hopefully get this fixed up next week. But I'm struggling a bit here tonight. I'm Grant Arthuring it tonight. Anyway, your number 2, Harrison.
All right, so Furiosa time. So, I had the Steelbook for Fury Road, so I had to get it for Furiosa.
Nice,
very good.
That's a nice fucking set.
Yeah, and then in the middle, in the inside, there's Dementus and the Octobus, and the 2 discs. So when Fury Road came out, it was 3D. There now this is a 4K Blu-ray and a regular Blu-ray. So you can sort of see how times have changed. Yeah, I don't have the black and chrome editions. I would have liked to pick them up for like completionist sake, but I think they're better in color. But about Furiosa itself, I mean, you've said a lot of it. Like Chris Hemsworth was a blast on screen, and even the side characters as well in these films tend to get a lot of characterization, and they're great. I particularly love the Octobus. He's a bit of a fan favorite as well. I love his horns, his bike that I also built out of Lego with the guns at the front, and his whole vibe. Some of these people, when they the apocalypse starts and they pick their vibe, Octobus picked his. But I love also how like Dementus's vibe changes. Like he gets hit with the flare, like you said, and goes all red, so he's like, what the hell, I'm the red Dementus now, sort of thing. And he just makes it his deal. But I love seeing like this world before. I love seeing Scabrous Scrotus. We'll get to him a little bit later. This isn't the first time he's appeared, but he's a little different to how he appeared previously. But I love seeing Chum Bucket too, the mechanic that gives Furiosa her 3-wheeled thing that she takes out at the end of the film. Not the first time he's appeared either, but we'll get to that after this. The thing I like about Furiosa as well is that as much as it's a Furiosa like prequel and origin story, it's as much of an Immortan Joe film, I think, as well, even though he's not in it as much. Like Immortan Joe in Fury Road had this commanding presence. He was awesome. But, you know, he was the top dog then. He was, you know, like you saw him basically trying to keep his power together because he was, you know, he crushed all the competition. You know, and Fury Road is basically him having the worst day of his life, and you see him get taken down. But in Furiosa, it's a little different. He's not the top dog around. He's got competition from like Dementors, and I love seeing him basically. You get to see in this film why he became the number one in that area of the wasteland. He's an absolute blast. Like watching him in his prime, basically negotiate with Dementus, you know, do his war council and all that, and even the way, like when they're talking about options and the way he asserts himself by saying, "There is my choice. We will do what I choose to do." You know, you can see why he became the leader and stuff, and you can see that. And I love watching Joe in this film as much as I love seeing Furiosa. His aesthetic is awesome too. I think he looks great. He still has that commanding presence. His voice is a little off. Hugh Keays-Byrne had this X factor with his Immortan Joe voice. It wasn't just like generic bad guy rasp. Lockie Hulme, who actually also plays Rizdale Pell, the guy with the big wig and the one eye on Dementus's crew. So when they're negotiating, there's like Lockie Hulme on one side of the screen, and then it's Lockie Hulme on the other side of the screen. As well, like basically almost talking to himself. But yeah, his voice wasn't as good as Hugh Keays-Byrne's, I think, but I still think it was good. I love seeing the Bullet Farmer again. I love seeing you know, the People Eater. He had an expanded role in this film, and you sort of see like how Joe trusts him. In the comics, it's revealed that the People Eater was just some nobody that was attacked by Joe's gang, and he basically offered up information to save himself. He said, "There's a citadel over there. It's got all sorts of water and everything." And so Joe sort of repaid him by making him boss of Gastown after he took him. And you can see that trust between Joe and the People Eater, because the People Eater speaks for Joe in the early negotiations. It is a more story-driven film. It's got a bit less action than Fury Road, but like Fury Road, it does the action really well. Granted, yes, there's a bit more CGI around. And then there's Praetor and Jack. Like, I love the character. I think he's great. I love how he's, you know, still managing to be good despite his circumstances. But at the same time, he's like the Mad Max stand-in, and it sort of like begs the question: could this film have just been rejigged with Mad Max in that role? It would have changed the lore up a lot by making Max one of like Joe's crew, but maybe you could have it that he messed up. You know, maybe that's why Joe's after him in Fury Road. I don't know. It's like it feels weird to have a Mad Max stand-in in a film series that's predominantly about Mad Max. I as much as I love the character, I don't know how I feel about him being in it. So it turns out, I'm going to talk about something else now. It turns out there's actually a third Mad Max universe, because there's this 2015 Mad Max video game. This was released to coincide with Fury Road. It was developed alongside Fury Road. So it was sort of initially envisioned as a prequel to Fury Road, but as development went on, it deviated. So it's in the same universe. Basically, you've got Gastown at the very north of the map. Then you've got basically new areas below the map. So, you know, if Gastown is here, then, you know, the Citadel's up there and Bullet Farm's up there, but you don't go there. You go underneath Gastown, below Gastown on the map, you know, south of Gastown. But you've got basically Scabrous Scrotus is the boss, Immortan Joe's third son. He's the boss of Gastown in this game, and his characterization is more or less the same. He's this big psycho, but he's actually, you know, huge and hulking, and basically he's the antagonist of the game. And then you've got other characters, you know, that you basically do shit for in order to get shit for yourself. You know, it is a video game, so there are some concessions made in order to facilitate it. Basically, at the start of the game, Max's interceptor is stolen, and then Chumbucket comes along with a chassis, basically, and says, "We could build the ultimate car," basically. So you basically spend the game building this car, putting like a ramming grill on it, like this. Like you can see, basically, there's this massive ramming grill. You know, you put bigger V8 engines on it, you cover it in spikes, you give it flamethrowers and all. So the car combat is, you know, it's really enjoyable, really satisfying. The physical combat, it feels great. You know, you feel the weight, but when Max hits, you know, he's a brawler. This is a a game that gets the Mad Max universe. The wasteland is beautiful. It's the most beautiful wasteland you've ever seen. You know, there's like dried out oceans with salt flats. There's, you know, ruined city, and somehow it all manages to look great despite being all shades of orange and red. It's light on story. Most of the game is about being in the Mad Max universe, but Hope and Glory appear in this game as, you know, mother and child again. It's a different Hope and Glory story to the comic one, but at the very end they get killed by Scrotus, and Max, you know, goes mad. You know, it's the same thing. Max is offered a chance to have a settle down, basically stop being so angry, but he gives it up. Then those people get killed because of him, and then he gets mad again. And at the very end, he kills Scrotus, gets the interceptor, and basically starts that cycle over again. And that's why I say it gets Mad Max, because it understands that he'll never have that peace because of who he is. And part of the game is he wants to cross the plains of silence, which are this huge dried out ocean. That's his end goal, because he basically thinks that there'll be some peace over there for him. It's basically the carrot, the hope that he dangles to himself to basically stop himself from going completely insane. And needless to say, he never gets there, because, you know, he starts on his cycle again of vengeance and anger and all of that. So I really like the game. The very last thing I'm going to say about it is because it was, you know, envisioned as a prequel to Fury Road. There's actually Dementus is mentioned in this film. He's dead at this point. Basically, the story is that Scrotus and Dementus had a war. Scrotus killed Dementus. So it's a little different to what ended up happening in Furiosa. So obviously it's its own universe. It's its own non-canon little side story. But it's really cool. In this, Dementus's chariot's a little different. It's basically a motorbike that's attached to the tray of a pickup truck, a small pickup truck, or a ute if you're here in Australia, and he rides it from up there. But I personally think his 3-cycle chariot is far cooler than the one we saw in the movies. But yeah, no, I personally really like the game. It's one of my favorite games of all time. And thanks, Rob. Yeah, so yeah, I'd like to see it. Unfortunately, it released on the same day as like another really famous game by a famous developer. And so it didn't sell as well, but everyone who basically played the game loves it to death. But yeah, unfortunately, it didn't sell well because of, you know, things. This was actually also the piece of media when the first trailer was revealed. Max had an American accent, and then they had to redub him in Australian when that got a whole pile of flack and kickback. But yeah, so I'll stop. This is what I wanted to rank this as my number one and not talk about Thunderdome, because that's my favorite piece of Mad Max media. But I decided to give you a straight list and just talk about the peripheral stuff anyway for a comprehensive look at it. But yeah, I'm done yapping about that for now. I'm glad Rob enjoyed it.
I was going to say thank you. Rob's obviously enjoying it, so appreciate that. And this is all stuff I didn't know, so, you know, all valuable information to me, even though to me it's not canon and I probably won't seek it out, but I appreciate knowing about it. But Peter, now we're on to your number 2 Mad Max film.
Yeah, just before I go to number 2, Furiosa tanked, flopped in America and lost a lot of money, so that could be the end of the series. Any sort of thoughts to this panel of why it didn't engage with audiences?
I think
we're in a post-COVID situation, so movies don't make as much money unless they like go absolute gangbusters like Avatar 2. I think a lot of it was also due to the fact that there was probably some residual resentment and disinterest in the film because of Fury Road being that bait and switch. I'd basically put those 2 reasons down to it. You know, not as much people going to the cinema and people not wanting to watch a Furiosa film.
Yeah, I think the resentment is that, you know, it's part of the Mad Max series and, you know, Mad Max is nowhere to be found really in this movie. So that could be the big... Are people... I'll put a question. Are people tired of peripheral character movies? Like, you've got the Star Wars universe. There's all these little movies that go into the side stories, like the Han Solo story and then the prequel. Are people getting tired of expanding the mythology and going down rabbit holes where they just lose focus on what the main narrative line is and who the main characters are?
I've always
100%.
thought people have a very funny relationship with filler. Like if you release a TV show with 15 episodes and a few filler episodes, people will like, this episode was filler. I don't like it. Give us the main story. But I personally think the filler is great because you get to see more of these characters you love, this world you love. You get to see them doing more stuff. In my opinion, more is better. But then if you were to release a TV show with, say, 7 episodes and say, yeah, we were going to make it 9 episodes, but then we decided to cut some for pacing reasons, people would be like, no, give us that. We want to see it. It's like if you give them the side story, they'll be like, they won't be as grateful for it. But if you don't give it to them, they'll want it. I think people have that sort of relationship with filler, unfortunately.
Yeah.
George Miller, I was going to make a Fury Road prequel, but I'm like, nah, let's focus on something else instead. People would be like bashing down his door for it, but he made it, and people were like, meh.
Yeah. Well, I think that, this got the budget for this movie was just huge, and they made lost a lot of money on it. So that could be the end of it. But I think reading a lot of social media, a lot of folk would have like Mel to make a comeback as an older grizzled Max, and that would have been an interesting story.
I think that we could, because it tanked, I reckon we won't see too many like Furiosa-centric things, but I reckon that George could probably convince the studios that we're going to do Max one last time. We're going to send him out in a blaze of glory, I reckon we could see one last film to cap it off that's Max-centric.
I agree.
I reckon that would be an easy sell.
And I think Mel would be game.
I think so too.
I think he would be.
Even if it's Tom Hardy, I'd like to see Mad Max in action once more.
No more Tom Hardy, please. Okay. I want Mel. And that leads me into my number 2, Mad Max. So Mad Max is a story about humans. We're back to there's machinery, there's action, but the main driver of this story is it's a human story, and it's a story of revenge, which is as old as the tales from medieval and beyond, back to the Stone Age. It's a basic movie. So to me, I think it's like a bit of a mishmash of a couple of genres. You've got A Clockwork Orange with the bikie gangs that talk in that really droogy language. Then you've got those bikie movies of the late 60s that had Peter Fonda on the AIP, the Roger Corman one, like The Wild Angels. And then you've just got a basic revenge thriller. And I think that the movie resonated so well to so many audiences. This is one of the biggest, most profitable movies of all time. I think Blair Witch Project might have beaten it, but for a considerable period of time, this was the most
like budget to profit ratio.
Yeah, it was one of the most profitable films ever made. And it's because people care about the characters. You care about Max. You see he's got a wife, he's got a daughter. You love the goose. You love the characters. They're all relatable. And when things happen to them, when things happen to these folk and bad things, you feel. And that's why you don't feel that in Fury Road or Furiosa, because you just don't really care. They're sort of like ornaments on a chessboard. It's sort of events that happen, but you don't have that emotional resonance or connection. But with Mad Max, it's relatable to our universe, even though it might be 30 years from the future, but you care about these people and what happens to them. And I tell you what, that in this movie, it's bookended by the first 20 minutes are some of the best action stunt sequences you'll ever see on film. And I put this as probably one of the greatest Australian films ever made. And the last 20 minutes is just some of the most powerful adrenaline sequences that you'll ever see in a film. It's just hits you between the eyes. And I just think it's just a wonderful film, but it's the most human out of it. It's before George Miller got more obsessed by the technique and the action sequences, the machinations. This is where he really took time with the characters and sort of, it was more of a human film than the others, which went down more of an action sort of sequence. So I think it's characters that you care about, but there are some action sequences in this movie that just are absolutely mind-blowing. And to me, it still shocks. Like the scene where the gang go to that town and they basically terrorize that town. Or the scene where they attack that couple. They're in the car and they start, that's terrifying. That's
and
still
why
relevant.
they were just random. They were just there, and then they tried to get away, and that was all they had to do was draw attention to themselves.
And it's very much now. The bad things that happen in the world are random acts of violence that are senseless, that make no sense in the world. Mel Gibson, charisma to burn. I think the first two movies, he was just charisma on a stick. I cannot understand why America dubbed all the dialect out when it was on the drive-in circuit.
And the Aussie slang got all changed.
Yeah, to me, the original with the Australian dialect is except no substitute. Hugh Keys-Byrne, he chews the scenery. What a performance. He's one of the greatest villains in this movie. It's Shakespearean, and he actually was a Shakespearean actor, and he did a lot of drama in the 70s and 80s. And I've followed his career, and he's done a few movies here and there, and his performance in this movie is just captivating. Your eyes are drawn to him, and to have a hero with charisma, you also need to mirror it with somebody of a strong personality, and he's the one. And I just think it's fantastic. But everything about this movie, it's just got a great story arc, and it's magical.
Yeah. I love the shot where the police cruiser just blows through the caravan and bits are flying everywhere.
Yes.
And it just flies through. I love Goose says, I don't know, man, I just got here myself, when he's on the ground.
That was great.
I love Goose.
Me too.
Yeah, it's really sad when he gets burnt up, basically.
Yeah.
But
you know what?
That's the film.
You know what? Let's just jump ahead here, because my number 2 is Mad Max. And Peter already said everything that I could possibly say about this film, including the Shakespearean aspect to Toe Cutter and Hugh's performance. And I want to also just mention Hugh's visual appearance too, with the hair. And, I believe he was wearing makeup on his eyes. And it's just, it was very Shakespearean. It was very stage. I loved, when I was a kid, I didn't quite understand the setting. Like, we are clearly on the downslide of civilization, but we're not obviously at Road Warrior territory yet. He has a job. He reports to work every day. There's a guy that works as a mechanic at a shop. They go on a vacation. They have a home. So we're not there yet. We're not into the poxy clips or whatever it's called in Thunderdome. We're not there yet. So it kind of takes, even rewatching it, kind of takes some adjustment to get used to the setting. It's unique among the 5 films. It's the only time we see the world at this stage of collapse, which presumably is, there's a shortage of gas. We're heading to collapse, but the nuclear exchange hasn't happened yet.
I think it's before the oil and water wars.
But we're getting there. We're clearly getting there.
Road Warrior.
Yeah. But then obviously circumstances drive Max to a path, and that path leads to an ending that, as kids, we were just blown away. Like, whoa, that's one of the coolest endings that we've ever seen. It's so cold, but this is the man that he has become. He was this father, he was this family man. He has more dialogue in this film than probably all the other ones combined, I'm guessing. But that's part of the appeal.
I think he only
has
like 8 lines in Road Warrior or something.
I read that he was partially modeled after the Man with No Name, Clint Eastwood's Man with No Name. And you definitely get that feeling. There is a spaghetti Western feel to some of these Mad Max films, but not this first one. This first one is almost a different genre. It's like Peter said, it's like a biker. It's one of those classic biker films crossed with the droogy aspect of A Clockwork Orange. I fully agree. Alex's droog gang is not that dissimilar from Toe Cutter's gang in certain aesthetic respects, There's also kind of an interesting side story with what was his name, Johnny.
Johnny the boy, yes.
Yeah, and he doesn't want to do these things, but Toe Cutter insists, and you don't say no. You don't say no. And I don't know. There's just so much going on in this film, and
reputedly, Johnny's fate at the end was the inspiration for the Saw franchise. Or, well, the first film in the Saw franchise, which then built the franchise.
I wouldn't know.
a little bit of an interesting bit of trivia. Like when Mad Max first went on TV, it was modified, obviously, and they cut out the whole last 5 minutes of the movie. So the bit where he's giving the options, you can saw through your ankle or, try your luck, that was actually completely cut off. So the modified TV version cut out about 20 minutes. So that's what I was going to you earlier, Harrison. There's still a lot of shocking scenes in this movie that may not be like gory or violent, but it's the implied violence and the impact of violence that I think it fully deserves its R rating. I still think it's fairly heavy going.
There are a few scenes that are a little harsh. So I agree, it does deserve its rating.
Yeah, it does have like a visceral realism to it that other films don't, even if they're more violent. I will give it that, yes.
I can tell Henry that I streamed Mad Max on, I will say I streamed it on the internet is what I'll say. And I was watching Australian versions.
These days, I don't think the American version gets distributed anywhere.
Okay, so that wouldn't
I think it's basically you have to track. I don't even think if there's VHS or them. Yeah,
I've got the DVD that has the alternative soundtrack if you want to hear it, and
you poor thing.
It's weird. It's really
you can get a taste of it on YouTube.
Okay, there you go.
There's bits of there. Yeah.
So if I'm keeping score correctly, we all picked the same number one film. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we just talk about how much we love The Road Warrior, starting with you, Harrison.
All right, yes. So without further ado, Mad Max 2. This is the Mad Max film to me. I think it is the only film in the series that properly captures Mad Max and the world. It's visceral, it's gritty, it's real, it's got history. And I love how, this is the best film, or the most treasured film in the franchise. But, in terms of the story, it's just Max just rolls up to this encampment that's got a problem, deals with the problem, goes off. It's like, as part of like the Mad Max history, it's like 2 days or 3 days in like, in this tiny part of the wasteland, but it's still, to those people, it's the most important day of their life almost.
It was their Alamo. It was their Battle of Waterloo. It was, the siege of Stalingrad.
But for Max, it's just more faces. I love the gyro captain, and I love the car. As I sort of alluded to earlier, it's got that nothing is sacred feel to it. Like Max rams the car in front of him. He damages his Interceptor's front end without a second thought. He does it because he has to. The appearance of the Interceptor is not preserved because it's the Interceptor. Max rams the car with it, because he has to. The Interceptor is destroyed later in the film. Max is nearly killed. There was this wonderful analysis of it that says, in the Mad Max universe, everyone stuffs up, everyone makes mistakes, even Max. Max is still alive because he's the one that recovers better when he makes a mistake and gets himself out of the situation. But even in the film, he's at the mercy of the guy until the until his explosion takes out the goons. He's almost about to be killed. It's like, it's real. Max has no plot armor. His car has no plot armor. That's part of that realism, that visceral grittiness. It's the antithesis to Hollywood, even though it's got these a lot of action, and it might appear like a Hollywood blockbuster, but it is like the furthest thing from. It's like the exact opposite, as I said, the antithesis to it, And as Peter was talking about, the stunts were real. In the first two Mad Max films, there were stunts that went wrong. People got hurt. People could have died. There's one shot in Mad Max 1 when the bikes are sort of like tumbling. You can see this guy get bashed in the head by a wheel. And the guy talks about that, that wasn't supposed to happen. That could have killed him. And then there's the shot when one of the bikes hit something and the guy in Roadway where the guy gets sent flying. What happened was his legs caught on something and it sent him spinning. He wasn't supposed to be spinning. But once that happened, he sort of like quickly adjusted and basically, not corrected his fall, but like managed his fall so that he didn't get killed, basically. I will admit that is missing, Fury Road, and they're a bit more stylized, but, this Road Warrior, this is Mad Max. And for my sort of rarity, I'm going to show off the rarest thing here. One of the rarest things I own. It's in about many years ago, probably more than 10 years ago, Auto Art did Auto Art are basically die-cast car manufacturers. They're very high-end. They're one of the most high-end ones. And they did their Road Warrior V8 Interceptor. Now, they did it in a gloss black paint, as if it was the Mad Max 1 machine, but with the Road Warrior accoutrement, like the removed front dam and the tires. But they also did a limited edition weathered version with the paint done up to do like Road Warrior. So this was limited to 2,000 copies. I have number 221. And so the car itself looks like this. So as you can see, it's got that weathered.
Do my clumsy zoom in here. There we go.
It's got that weathered look to it. You can see it's got that dirt up on it. It's still got bits of dark grey, black. The windscreen you can see has like the
nice
dust on it.
You can see where the wipers have cleaned off.
Yeah. The rear's got the tire and all of that. I particularly love the thing. You've got Dog sitting inside with the bone in his mouth.
Cool.
There's a couple of other knives and accoutrement, but the thing that was so what's exclusive to this version, as well as the paint job, the Dog is basically in a different pose. In this one, he sits in here. In the original version, he's standing. But this version also includes the ability for you to remove the front bit to replicate the part where he basically has it smashed off when he rams another car. I never do that because I prefer it with the front on, and then you can open up the bonnet and get a look at the interior in there, the supercharger. I love this. I'm so glad I was able to get it, but let me tell you, I paid the late tax dearly for this. I'm not going to tell you how much I paid on this, but let's just say I could have bought a piece of shit car for the same money I paid for this car model.
Wow. You are a serious fan, Harrison.
I am, yes.
You are serious.
Yes,
wow.
I just had to have that. As cool as this is, it just isn't the same.
No,
there was a weathered version of this done, basically with the Road Warrior paint. I almost bought it, except they didn't bother to remold the back end and put the tires in. So it's sort of like an intermission Interceptor, like before he put the tanks in, but after it was all weathered and crap. But yeah, I had to have the real deal. I had to have this thing.
That is a beautiful thing.
And then, of course, there's the Lego version I built.
Yeah.
Which I have done up in the Road Warrior configuration with the tanks in the back.
And we will be seeing more of that in the future.
We will.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Anything more you want to say about the Road Warrior before we pass it off to Peter?
I think I've said everything I want to.
Okay.
I'll definitely interrupt if something comes up, but I'll try.
Oh, I'm sure we will have a lively discussion as we continue to praise this wonderful post-apocalyptic masterpiece. Peter, your thoughts?
Look, this movie is probably my all-time 10 favorite movies of all time. I love it.
I'd agree.
I never get sick of it, and I just think that the last 30 minutes is probably the greatest action sequences committed to film. I never get tired of it. It's just so thrilling. And it's like an updating of the old Stagecoach with John Wayne, and you've got the Indians, and the oil rig is like replicated as the Stagecoach, and there's so much peril, and it's just bloody exciting.
Yeah, it turns out I will be interrupting early. In that final battle, as I was talking about, like the nothing is sacred. Papagallo, the warrior woman, and the guy in the wheelchair, they all die without, they don't get heroic last words. They go out, as soon as they die, basically the camera's off them. The warrior woman's dead there. There's no plot armor. There's no like heroic goodbye or anything. It's real, basically.
No,
sorry to interrupt, but yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just going to quickly highlight the sequences on the film that still provide my hair's up on the back of my head standing on end. In no particular order, the sequence where he gets the feral kid to get that bullet case in the front, and he goes, "Hey kid, get the bullet, go on, get the bullet. And, and the soundtrack goes, boom, 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 boom. And the camera pans in, and you've got the feral kid and the look on his face, it's like that. And then you see Wes, and he's in the the nitrous oxide vehicle, and he's going like this, and it's a head-on crash, and it's like, to me, that's heavy metal. It's just wonderful.
That's what I was going to say, Peter.
Tired.
Is that Wes is like a cross between Blackie Lawless and the punk rock scene.
Yep. Another bit, like he only has 38 lines of dialogue. So he's like the Steve McQueen in this movie, charisma to burn. And he goes, if it's all right with you, he whistles,
Yep. It's all right with you. I'll drive that tanker.
Yeah. Come
And
to
then they're
me.
like, look at you,
Like
you're
that.
a wreck. You can't even stand.
And the camera just pans to him.
Yeah.
Just love it. The bit at the end where he realizes, so he comes out, he's all, he's completely stuffed up. The tanker's on its side, and he realized that he was just carrying dirt. And the gyrocopter guy comes in, flies in, and he goes, has a bit of winks at him. It's the only time where you see Max has a little bit of a half smile, and you feel he's still got his humanity, because this movie is about a bloke that's lost his humanity, but he lives in a world that's transactional. What can you do for me that I can do, to better me, And he's always thinking about himself. It's self-interest because it's a survival instinct. But that moment at the end, when Bruce Spence comes in the gyrocopter and has a bit of a wink and smile, and he half smiles, you realize he's still got a little bit of humanity. And you can see his interaction with the feral kid, that there's still that humanity.
Yes.
And that makes this movie very special. And boy, that voiceover at the end where he goes, and I never saw that guy again. Oh my God. That is the greatest line of dialogue in any movie ever.
That's the common thread. All the people, he goes into their life and then he leaves it, and that's it. There's no keeping in touch.
It reminds me of an old Western called Shane. This guy comes to this town, he helps the people, and he's never seen again,
Oh, I just love it. I like Mike Preston as the leader of the, what's it going to be, Max?
Yeah.
He's really annoying. Probably deserves to get punched out, but he's going,
I personally like it. I personally like it when he calls Max out saying, you think you're the only one that lost someone? We all lost someone, but we got on with our life.
And it's inspired casting, because Mike Preston was a game show host, and he was a little bit of a cabaret character in Australian TV. So George Miller, in picking Mike Preston for the role, was just absolutely inspired. But he's kind of the conjurer. He's like in a Shakespearean play, is the one that's just poking at the hero to make him, he's actually provoking Max to act and do what he does. What's it going to be, Max? Come on, Max. He's like in his face, come on, what are we going to do? So many wonderful scenes. Now, I don't want to spoil it, but that sequence with the truck, that was actually filmed at 30 kilometers or 20 kilometers per hour. A lot of it's sped up. Yes, you look at that if you look at that movie in real speed, it looks like it's just done at 100 miles per hour.
Mm-hmm. The shot earlier in the film when the interceptor's like fleeing the compound, you can tell that's sped up just by looking at it. But the chase at the end is flawless.
It absolutely is. So when the actors were doing that, they had to do their actions that corresponded with the speed that they were driving the rig and with the cameras and all that. So I just think that is absolutely magical. But it still packs a punch. There's a lot of shocking scenes in it. It shows that these villains, these scavengers, are really mean business when they infiltrate the village, and they use humans as battering ramps and raping and pillaging. It's really kind of serious business. But look, Max.
But I like how it's like never in work of some like Hollywood like great evil. It's all just people doing this. It's people making the choice to hurt other people. It's real in that way.
And it's all about survival. And yes, he does. He does play a bit of a Clint Eastwood role, Mel Gibson, bit of Steve McQueen, but I love towards the end that there's humanity, because even though it's very transactional along the way, everything is like self-interest. He does show his humanity, and this makes this a truly great film. It's a masterpiece.
Well said. Well said. I'll add a couple of things. The shots that you were talking about. Get the bullet. Get the bullet. That's one of the most tense sequences in the entire film because you're just like, come on, kid, come on, grab the bullet.
Yeah, Max has the guy clawing on his shoulder there.
Yeah,
as well.
And it's just the way it's cut, the way the music, as Peter mentioned. Oh, it's possibly the most tense sequence in the film. Brilliant. That ending that you talked about when Max smiles when the dirt pours out of the tanker. It's a smile that says, well, F me, they sure got me. It's a smile that says they got away. And it's a smile that just says, the irony, and he's not alone at that point. He's got the gyro captain with him. So at least he's not.
I think the captain goes back with I'm pretty sure the gyro captain.
He becomes their leader,
with the people. Yeah,
he becomes their leader. But at least you can rest assured that Max will survive this latest setback in his life. He's got somebody with him, so he's not.
Max is a survivor.
Yes, and because he's not alone, I feel there's a certain assurance that he's not doomed to die. There's a beautiful scene with the feral kid, but also with Max himself. And it's a brilliant moment of acting on Mel Gibson's part. But it's the part at the beginning of the film where the little music box falls out of the dead man's hand and Max picks it up and winds it. No, it wasn't Pop Goes the Weasel. It was Happy Birthday. It was Happy Birthday. Yeah. And he dials it. And there's just the hint of a smile on Mel Gibson's face, just enough. And you realize in that one moment, humanity, this is the first time that Max has heard music in his ears in years.
Yes.
And for the feral kid, when he gives it to the feral kid, it's the first time he's heard music in his life. And those are really powerful moments. And you see it on the kid's face, right? Emil Minty was the name of the actor who played the kid. And God, who didn't love that kid when we were growing up? We thought the hair was a little ridiculous, but it was the 80s. Everybody had really good hair in this movie, didn't they? The Warrior Woman, as you mentioned, she had incredible hair. She had good styling products.
So influential. And I tell you, so many Italians rip-offs of this movie. Like in the video store, within a year, there was 2012, The Fall of Rome, The New Centurions, The New Roman Warriors. There were all these spaghetti rip-offs of Mad Max. So this is such an influential... And look at heavy metal. Look at hair metal. You can't tell me that the wardrobe of Mad Max didn't influence Motley Crue, Rat, Dokken,
so
all of that scene.
Motley Crue. Okay, so Wes has a crossbow bolt shooter on his wrist. Vince Neil had one on his wrist in the Shout at the Devil outfit. And Wes's buttless chaps felt very Blackie Lawless to me. He was also one of my favorite characters, even though he's not really a character. He's more of an animal than a character. His few lines of dialogue are more growled than spoken.
What about Just Walk Away? Just walk away. There's too much violence. There's too much violence.
I think the best thing about that is you can't be sure whether he's telling the truth or not. Like, he may just let them go, but you don't know.
Right, which plays out in the compound afterwards, where some saying, it sounds reasonable to me, and somebody else saying, he's going to slaughter us the moment we walk out there, something like that. But Humongous, what a great villain. I think he's the prototype for Morton Joe in many respects. The commanding presence, the powerful speaker, the slightly mutilated appearance. Which
and I love
the
quick shot basically of the photo of him before in his gun case. It's
is that him or shot. Is that his parents? Is that his family? That's a black and white.
I thought it was
photo.
Him and his wife, but
the black and white.
I guess
photo.
that's the beauty of it. So it could be anyone in there.
It's the near future, right? Sorry, lost my train of thought. There's so much going on with this film that I love. I love George Miller's penchant for having characters suspended from bungees. He loves to suspend his characters from bungees. He loves strapping characters to the front of a vehicle, a moving vehicle. There's all that stuff here, and it's brutal. There's so much brutality in this movie. You see these vehicles try to escape the compound. They're making it down the road, and within seconds, like buzzards, the motorcycles are in pursuit. With a few seconds more, you see the vehicle overturn, and Bruce Spence is watching this. through a telescope, and his
Mm.
face tells the story. He sees the brutality happen. He sees an execution, and it all plays out on his face. That even now, in this wasteland future that they live in, this gang is still shocking. You know, there's still enough civilization within the Bruce Spence character that what's playing out before him is absolutely shocking him to the
Well, yeah,
core.
that wasn't for survival. That was they chose to go after those
That was
people. and kill them.
brutality. Yeah, that was brutality.
Yeah, I think it's a toss-up between the gang in the first movie and the gang in the second, and who are the most wicked. I think it's just on a par.
I think the first movie, they had a playfulness to them that isn't there with Humongous's gang.
I think they were pretty wicked in their own way.
Yeah,
but more of the real world. But there's really minimal moral compass in this second gang. They're just scavengers, and it's all about survival. And I really don't think you could actually negotiate with Lord Humongous. So,
well, that one gentleman sure thought that he could. He's a reasonable man. I'll go talk to him. And what would have happened to him if he tried? He would have come back strapped to the front of a car.
Yeah. But
yeah,
Mike, in this movie, when people die and people are under the wheels of rigs and things, you can actually feel it. There's so much peril, and you can hear the bones crunch. It's just, and comparative to those later films, it's just, I don't know. It just seems more of the real world.
I agree. I'm watching this film, and even though you don't spend a lot of time with these characters, such as Papagallo or the Warrior Woman, you do start to feel something, so that when they do die, as Harrison said, there is no plot armor. When they do die suddenly and dramatically, not only is it a shock, but it's kind of like, oh no, that character's dead.
Yeah, like the Warrior Woman spends most of the film with an arrow to our main character's face, but we still care about her when she dies.
And Papagallo, he's a very charismatic leader, even though I'm 100% certain that he is hoarding bleach, because that hair color is not natural, in my opinion.
Yeah, he didn't deserve to die, but at the end of the day, the Wasteland doesn't care about what you deserve or not. No, he just gets a spike in the back, and Max actually takes his car in the end.
And again, that's part of it, which is the Wasteland does not care. This is the bleak future, and this is the early 80s. I remember growing up in the early 80s, and there was like this constant threat of nuclear holocaust playing out in film, in comic books, in music.
Well, yeah, that happens because basically the narratives of the time, I'm going to get a bit philosophical here, the narratives of the time period reflect the cultural fears of the time period, and the narratives are a way of reassuring yourself that things will be all right if your worst fear comes to pass. Like, do you remember about like 2014 Hunger Games? Dystopia was all the rage because that's what we were scared of. And these films were a way of telling ourselves, even if it goes dystopian, we'll do it. We'll take down the oppressors and all that.
Good observation. And by the way,
sorry.
I was going to say good observation. And by the way, I also feel there's some inspiration in the Hunger Games from Thunderdome. The idea of here's your arena, here's your weapons.
Like I said, Thunderdome had like one of the most lasting impacts of anything in the franchise. It came back twice. It came back in the game. There's a Thunderdome in the game. There's a Thunderdome in the comics in Gastown. It's like, it is, I think, the most enduring. And I think that was, back in the day, that was one of the biggest praises that Beyond Thunderdome got, was the novel and ingenious way of making that fight was the Thunderdome itself.
Two more movies that I think you could put in the universe that were influential to this movie. Death Race 2000. Have you guys ever seen that Roger Corman movie?
I haven't.
Yeah, 1975. Only goes for 70 minutes. Sylvester Stallone. And it's about a race from one end of America to the other, and they have to run over as many people and score points. And, it's sort of comic but violent, and I think that was influential. Rollerball too, with James Caan. That's another one. A dystopian society where violence is the people get entertainment as violence. So that's sort of that futuristic violence, sport type of theme to it. And there's kind of a lot of I don't know. Some of the violence in this is kind of like a sporting contest. I don't know, in some of the
Yeah,
Max.
they wear like hockey pads as armor and that. It sort of.
I was
going to
say, you guys must have a
Yeah.
lot of sporting goods stores in Australia, because these guys' entire wardrobe is made out of shoulder pads from football and all these other sports. So you guys obviously are very much into
Yeah,
sports
considering
in
we're a
Australia.
desert, I'm surprised we have so much hockey gear here and all of that.
Logan's Run is very different for a post-apocalyptic film. I mean, most of the movie takes place under a dome, whereas this is every man for himself in a wasteland. Oh, one other scene that always struck me as a kid and still does today. It just paints the picture of how far this world has fallen. It's when Mad Max opens up the can of dog food, and the gyro captain just. It's like salivating, like, oh my God, give me some of that. Give me some of that dog food, man. Give me some of that dog food. And I remember seeing that as a kid.
You basically get health back by eating dog food and eating maggots, basically. There's that callback there.
Anyway, I think that, this is something that in today's movies, mainstream movie, this will all be done by like exposition, but in Mad Max, they do it all with just a look in the eye and a performance.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about the world building of, say, George Miller and George Lucas is they basically drop you in the middle of this world and they reference events and characters from the past that you're obviously not expected to know what happened, but they make the world seem alive. Like the oil and the water wars, they're dropped, we don't get told about what the oil and the oil was. Well, we're told we basically have to infer. And like in Star Wars, Princess Leia says, years ago, you served my father in the Clone Wars. In the original trilogy, that's it about the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
That's it. Gets mentioned once, but it makes the world seem real because there are events that the characters know about that we're not familiar with, but they act familiar with it. And that is also in Mad Max as well. Like, in the first movie, we're familiar, the characters are familiar with, say, Johnny the Boy and the Night Ride, even though we're just basically getting to know them. And I think that's one of the best things you can do. It seems to be a George thing, George Lucas, George Miller, just great world building like that.
Well, guys, we've been at this for almost 2 hours. What do you want to say about Mad Max before we call it a night? If anything.
The Interceptor is my favorite vehicle in all of fiction. So
okay. I applaud you. Sorry.
Yeah, two of the greatest Australian films ever made, Mad Max 1 and 2. Please watch it.
Yeah, and as for me, a cornerstone of my childhood, a character that I tried to dress up as, and a film that stands up today, perhaps even stronger. Art imitating life imitating art. We have a lot of different stuff going on in these Mad Max films that you can certainly analyze to your heart's content. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me tonight. What do you two guys have cooking on Rock Daydream Nation?
The next monthly Australian panel hasn't been decided yet, as far as I know.
Yeah, but the show's going to be probably dropping this weekend or a couple of days. Within the week, Harrison, we did a show on 3 Australian albums that you must hear before you die. So Harrison came up with some real bangers, and like the rest of the panel, Peter Wicks and Bicycle Legs. So that'll be coming up. But yeah, we'll be recording another episode. I think we might do the Dark Horse one, Harrison.
All right.
We'll talk offline. Yeah.
So I basically suggested a Dark Horse albums show, but I don't have 3. I don't own 3 Australian Dark Horse albums. So Mike, would you and Peter, would you be okay with Mike submitting a video about one of his favorite mid-80s AC/DC albums, and then we can run that as one of my picks? Basically, you might have to edit it in post-production.
Oh, we'll do something.
Because I've only got 2 albums to talk about, and presumably we're going to talk about 3. But I know Mike likes some mid-80s AC/DC, so
I do.
He's not Australian.
We'll work something out.
We can talk. As for myself and Mr. Bicycle Legs, we have a video that's going to be coming out at 7 a.m. tomorrow, Eastern Standard Time. We are we are picking our favorite tracks from the first 8 Marillion albums, the EMI years. This is a part 1 Marillion show. We're going to be doing part 2 in the new year, but this is my first appearance on Bicycle Legs. So I'm very excited about that. And on Grab a Stack of Rock next week, I'm very excited. We are going to be interviewing Archie Gamble, the former drummer from Helix. He was in the band from 96 to 2006-ish. And I'm very excited to be talking to Archie. This is a period of Helix that is not discussed enough, and hopefully will shine some light on what was going on during that era. And that's about
So
it.
My scheduled reappearances for the era are basically out now with this show, but I'm sure I will be back. That's
we'll have you back in December. We're gonna do some kind of year-end thing. I don't know what, but we'll have you back before
this is
the end of the year.
But at the very end, because I have two Somewhere in Time fans here. I did just recently pick up this bootleg, Paris 1986 Iron Maiden.
Where'd you get it? eBay?
I just eBay, yeah. This is a 2024 release, so it's probably easier to find.
Cool. Peter, anything else on Rock Daydream Nation you want to plug before we go?
Yeah, did a show with Tom Curlis of Curlis Mania on an album battle with The Church, Heyday versus Starfish. And we've got to plug our show that we did on ELP, Out of Our Comfort Zone.
Oh, that's right,
Brain
too.
Salad Surgery. A lot of folk are really enjoying that, and I think it really turned out well.
It did turn out really well.
Mike and I were
nervous.
at the pump, we're sweating and tackling.
You could see
that was fun. That was fun.
I could feel like eyeballs in the back of my head, staring at me as I squirm
Mike,
into the spotlight. It was
you
good
did
though.
Well. You did
was
well,
good.
Don't put yourself down. You were good.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, guys. You guys have a wonderful weekend. I will see you, as Mel Gibson said in Gallipoli, I'll see you when I see you, not if I see you first. As we always like to go out in a song, so we may as well go out in some Max the Axe. It just kind of goes with the theme. So this is Max the Axe, Scales of Justice. We'll see you next week with Archie Gamble on Grab a Stack of Rock. Take care, everybody.
See you later. Bye. Go.